Hello, my friends. Blaine here from the Royal Ramble podcast, and I have a special treat for you today because I'm joined by a special guest. Many of you who grew up in Canada in the 90s probably recognize this guy. He was an on-air host for a very popular Canadian television broadcast or network, and he's also a pro wrestler, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So that is Phil Guerrero, otherwise known as PJ Phil. Phil, how are you doing?
I'm good. The dog's
Thanks for
sleeping.
joining me.
Yeah.
Thank you both for joining me. We will start by asking. So I spoke about our childhood. Of course, you're a familiar face, and I wanted to ask a little about your childhood and what it was like growing up for you. And at what point did you discover that you had a talent for on-air broadcasting?
Um, okay, so my childhood was super middle class. My father was a high school teacher, my mother was a nurse. Immigrated here to Canada in 1965. I was born here in 71, which makes me 53 years old. Um, yeah, dude, lived in Toronto, kind of, yeah, like middle class, but I don't know. I also went to private school for a bit. So I had that in my life, got kicked out of private school, which was bad and good. um, and then of course, yeah, got kicked out, went to Jarvis High School, went to public school. And and the TV thing started early for me. It started my last year of high school. And then turned into like an 11-year career till I was like 30, 31, 32. Yeah, that was it. That's pretty much it. Yeah. Did I know I always wanted to be in television. I always thought I could do something. I'd watch TV and be like, I'd love to do that. But just through a string of luck and timing, I ended up doing that stuff later on. I never did drama in high school or anything. I didn't pursue it like that. My parents wanted me to be like a lawyer or a doctor, like you would if you were spending money for private school. You'd want that for your kid. But yeah, but it turned out, and I'm still here.
Mhm. And talk to me about how you ended up at YTV doing the Zone and other shows like that. Like how did that come to be?
That came to be really through a friend of mine from private school. His name was Russ, and he was like a child actor. He hosted a show called the Kangaroo Club for Global, where it was just him and this girl, and they would go to African lion safari all the time, and just talk about animals, and did commercials. And I was like, yeah, it's cool, like I always wanted to do that. And in my last year of high school, he was working for YTV when they just started. He was a co-host for a show called YTV Rocks, and they were looking for another host. He said, I have a guy you could take a look at. He's really funny, makes me laugh, like, kind of thing. And got me an audition. I didn't get the job. Um, I remember they hired two other people, not me, but they said, we're also looking for a reporter. Would you want to do like maybe 5 stories or, and I was like, yeah, sure, sure. And I did that in my last year of high school. I was just a kid. And that was that. I went away to university, failed, flunked out of Concordia. Really didn't go to my classes. Anyways, yeah, flunked out of there. Was gonna tell my parents that I'm not going back to university. And my roommate was Russ, and we stayed up one night, and he said, school's not for you, man. If that's what you want to do, you got to go do it. Funny, and like he would be the first person to tell me, no, you better buckle down. And he said, no, man, and he was right. And YTV called me back again to audition for a show called Street Noise, which got canceled. So, and then the other show I auditioned for was the Countdown Video Show, which they ended up giving to Tarzan Dan.
Mhm.
And yeah, the hit list. I didn't get that, but they were doing something called PJs throughout the day for preschoolers that ended at 3:30, and they said we are going to try to do it after school, like a bit of an older version, called the After School Zone. Would you want to try that? We don't know where it's going or what it is, or you know, um, it was a 6-month contract. I did 3 days a week. The other 2 days were done by this other PJ named Gord the PJ Man, Gord Wolvet. He did 2 days a week of the after school zone, and he would also do the preschool stuff too. So, but I was only 3 days a week for like a 6 month contract, and it turned into 11 years. Not just the zone, but anti-gravity room and all kinds of other things. I honestly can't even remember what it was, but yeah, 11 years from when I was 19, 20 to 31, 32. So maybe 11 years. Because I remember my last year, there was 1 year where I was just doing, I think, the anti-gravity room, or they renamed it Warp. Or no, it was or gamers. I can't remember. It's like I said, it's like I did a ton of stuff over there.
And were there any kind of challenges at the time? Of course, social media wasn't a thing. The internet was still kind of in its infancy years in the early 90s. Were you faced with any kind of challenges in just kind of getting the word out there? How did the shows like that become popularized?
So it's like what, the zone?
Well, just and the network
Oh,
in general.
YTV. Sorry?
The network in general.
The network was new. And it was Canada's first kids network. So were there growing pains? I don't know, because we were lucky in that we were the only kid on that block. Like, who else was there? There was no competition, really. Much music was a lot older, skewed a lot older, just did different things. So it was a learning process where I feel like, now looking back, I don't think we could have gone wrong. You know what I mean? Like, it's kids. That's the dog. Anyway, yeah, it's kids. So how can you go wrong? You know? Hey, not that one. Hold on.
Yeah.
It's noisy, man. Take a tennis ball. Yeah, that's my life now. No. So yeah, like you couldn't go wrong. But I will also tell you, that station was like a family. It was about 250 people. It grew. But wow, like I think about it. What made that job was just everybody I worked with, from the people in the tape library to marketing to promotions to just everybody. It was like a family, really nice people. I don't know how that, like everybody I worked with was just fantastic. Like a family. Like, I'll tell you. And that, that's hard to find. I lucked into that. I lucked into the people that I worked with, for sure. Yeah, I have to say that. That's first and foremost. My producers, like my co-hosts, just the people at that station, like top notch people, real professionals too, and young people learning, surrounded by professionals like old schoolers, but everyone was really nice, man. Yeah, and I think that's what, that, like, maybe you guys didn't know that was going on behind the scenes, but maybe that's why you watched, and it became such a part of your lives because of the people that were behind it.
So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about this, because it was one of my favorite memories from my childhood, is watching the Dark Knight series. And of course, you were instrumental involved in that. Do you recall, for those who don't know, it was an annual thing that they did every Halloween, consisting of 4 Halloween themed shows. Like, there was Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, etc. Do you recall how that came to be, and how you became involved with that?
Can't remember when it started. It always really just started with, I really feel like it began with, we would do these things where we would show maybe Goosebumps 3 times in a row, and it became something like, that kind of curation. Like, why not on Halloween we'll show all our scary shows? It'll be all scary shows, and like I say, like, it was the people that were behind that network, like the programming department, like they, the producers, they really cared about you guys. They really cared about what they showed you, and and what they thought you might like, which I don't think exists anymore. Not with all this content. I don't know how it could. You sort of had to sort of be a part of that world where it was just newspapers, magazines, television, and radio, like with 0 choices. So I think back then you felt maybe more of a responsibility of like treating you guys like that. I know that when I was on, I never, I don't know if it happened by accident or what, but I didn't treat you guys like you were dumb. You know what I mean? I didn't treat you like, hey, everybody, like, I just talked to you like, but I think that really just came out of like me being in a studio with no one to talk to but the cameraman. And if I could make the camera person laugh, um, then maybe I'm doing it right. Like, I don't know. I also didn't know, like, I had nothing to talk about, right? Like, so I needed to bounce off of someone, you know. But I remember parents coming up to me and like a few specific things they would say that really that I'll always note, that they said like you don't treat the kids like they're dumb. Like I would use hard words, or you know, and if you don't know it, look it up. Like that's life, you know, like that's.
Right.
But I would never be like, "Hi, kids!" Like,
Yeah.
you know, I would talk about getting speeding tickets. I watched some of the stuff on YouTube. The stuff I talked about, I was like, "What are you doing?" I remember there's ones like I was telling you, always have your insurance and registration in the car. You're going to be driving one day, and I think you guys like that. And yeah, good, good. You know, really, it was just and nothing else to talk about besides my life. Like I was 20, you know what I mean? You were 12, I was 20. I was getting a 48-hour notice ticket for not having my insurance in.
Yeah.
So I was warning you guys. And then later on, I know you guys came up to me later when the fans were like, you guys were like 20, 30s, like, yeah, you were right. Keep that insurance in there.
But I think things like that, like little quips that you would throw in, and even talking to the camera, kind of made us feel more involved with the shows.
Yeah, for sure. Someone's there watching it with you. Right?
For sure.
For
So
sure.
you left YTV at the turn of the century, I believe, heading into the new millennium.
Yeah, it's funny how it worked, right? Like I
Yeah, I was
started
just going to
in
ask what the
89, 90.
motivation was for your departure, and also can you talk to me a little about life after then?
So I did that for 11 years. I hosted the NBA draft. I did Dark Nights. I did award shows. I did another show called The Anti-Gravity Room and Gamers and a show called Warp. And I traveled. I interviewed millions of people, from like actors to comic book artists to yeah, like so. I honestly felt that after 11 years, um, I there was no more for me to do or learn. So I just left. Like I could have stayed, you know. Even in my last year of YTV, I remember thinking I could maybe sabotage this by asking for a ridiculous amount of money. And then finally the pain, like, you know what I mean? Like, not the pain, but the struggle will be over. Then I'd be set free and now I can just move on. I'm 30 years old. There's still time to do all kinds of other things, or it's just something different, just not kids like this. And learn something new. And yeah, I gave him a ridiculous number. I remember my boss. She was the greatest, Melanie. She was like, uh, I'll be right back. She went out of the office and she was like, okay, we can give you that. And I swear to God, I was like, another year, because I thought I'd, do that thing where I'll get my visa and move to Hollywood, which I eventually did a year later. But not really, because it was after 9/11. So it was kind of a mess. It took me, it got to postpone like a year and a half, my plans to go do all that. But I eventually did. I moved to Hollywood, did everything but acting or television. The first thing I did, I joined a band, a goth industrial band, like a Nine Inch Nails band. I toured the States. I did a few dates here in Canada, played in Honolulu. I worked at American Apparel. I got kicked off of a stylist reality show, which was funny because after learning a little, like I gave myself a crash course in fashion styling, got kicked off, came back, made myself like this heavy metal jacket with all the studs and Iron Maiden on the back, wore that at Hollywood parties. I had like actors coming up to me, Where'd you get that jacket? I made it. Are you a designer? Yes. Like, because LA, you hustle. You
Mm.
know, are you a writer? Yeah. Do you have a horror script? Yeah, I'll be in next week. And then you write that script. You learn in a day to write a script, and then you take 6 days to write it, and then you go take that meeting. Like that's how you survive in Hollywood.
Mm.
So yeah, I did all kinds of stuff out there. Worked at American Apparel, at a real Joe job, pardon my language, you know, $12 an hour, shipping mannequins, building interiors of those American Apparel stores. Like,
Mhm.
you know, but loved it because I'm learning something. Do you know what I mean? I didn't give a shit what was new to me. But I loved it. Like I was surrounded by like Mexican gangsters. They were my coworkers, you know, like they'd walk in and they'd be like, "Hey, what are you eating? Like for lunch? Oh, chicken sandwich. Must be nice." You know, that kind of thing. And I loved it. I loved being around these guys and learning about them and what they're about and how they almost shot their gun on the weekend. You know, like it was fun. I took hip hop dance classes from Justin Timberlake's choreographer
Mm.
at this place called Millennium in North Hollywood, like this legendary place that like Britney Spears would book out before her tour to do her routines. And you know, like it was a really wild time. It was the 2000s in Hollywood, which was paparazzi and the beginning of iPhones and a bottle service and pool parties and like all the clubs in Hollywood were hot at the time. I remember seeing Lady Gaga on a Wednesday night with like not full club, like she was
Mm.
still like beginning, you know. One night Snoop Dogg came. I literally got into that club and they would usually let me in, but that night was nuts. And I literally got in by like watching the bouncers standing there like in, you know, like it was a wild time, man. Bush was president, but it was a fun time, man. I think it was like the last decade. Those 2000s were the last of the good decades of like it was a fun decade in Hollywood. I'll tell you, I was crashing these parties when I got into Hollywood. When I got into fashion, that's when that place really opened up to me. It wasn't that I had this great agent at ICM. You had to book those gigs to get into that. But all of a sudden, when you were in fashion, you're going to all these parties, man. And it was like Paris Hilton was here, and I met Nicole Richie and Pink and Lindsay Lohan, and like it was a crazy time. And I got into that Hollywood thing, the psychology of those parties and hustling and always saying yes. Like we're you know, when LA like 2 a.m. hits, they take the drink out of your hand. There's not even finished that up. It's like, and everyone's like, where are we going? And one night I'll tell you this story. I ended up like the car train, like in Swingers, going up to some mansion in the hills. And it's like I walked in. If you know anything about modern art, there's like the Duchamp urinal, like $1 million piece of art, of modern art sitting there, and then a Warhol, like a real Warhol on the wall, and Damien Hirst. And I was like, where are we? And the girl at this, and there's a guy with champagne and cigarettes, like some champagne is like, where are we? It's like, well, he's one of two brothers. The other brother owns Tropicana juice. He owns Umex juice. Oh, like this big company in Mexico. He's the largest Mexican collector of modern art. He
Mhm.
opened up a museum in Mexico City, this guy, and he had his house in LA. You know, you always say yes, you know, because there's always an adventure. Like you'll end up waking up on the beach at 10 a.m. You just always say yes. But yeah, it was a wild time, and I learned how to reinvent myself and do one, like I don't need to just do this, and I didn't need to do it at it. Like I would sort of, I got into this bad habit where the fashion got too much, where it's like, okay, this is a business. It's not fun. I'm gonna do something else. Like, you know what I mean? I
Right.
got addicted to do this and do that. Where I treat my hobbies the same way. You know, I get into vintage stereos or I constrict tennis rackets because I play tennis and I have a tennis racket stringer. I nerd out. Like I nerd deep into stuff, you know. But yeah, it kind of became this blessing and a curse where then I wasn't really concentrating on my career. I was just jumping from one thing to another, which brings us to wrestling was another way. Like where I was like, oh, I think I want to try this. Do you know what I mean? Like, because of joining the band and getting into fashion and hip hop dance and this and that and working in American Apparel, I can do whatever I want to do.
Mhm.
I can start wrestling training at 50, 51. You know what I mean? Which is, I look back at it, and when I always look back at these things, I'm like, that was ridiculous, man. Like, what are you thinking? Like, because I knew wrestling and I didn't know wrestling. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I had the gumption to go, okay, I'm going to try this at my age.
Mhm.
And I also had the opportunity of someone giving me the opportunity.
Is
Like,
it is it
I
is
go
it
ahead.
something that you've always wanted to do? Like, were you always a fan, or how did you
I
get
was a
into it?
fan when I was young. I remember Blackjack Mulligan and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat I
Mhm.
related to because he was Asian,
Yeah.
Jake the Snake, but I wasn't like a wrestling nerd. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? I did have it, but never deep into my life. What happened was during COVID, my wife and I, their friend's son had a birthday and they were going to see wrestling. I was like, oh, let's go. And it was like a dark show. Now I know what a dark show means. At the time, I was like, this is not on TV. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know. It's so, but like as a performer, as someone who came from television and tried to do acting and all this, I was like, holy shit, this is fun, man. Like, a whole crowd screaming 1, 2, and like that collective after being
Yeah.
cooped up in COVID, and it was storytelling, and you're seeing this unbelievable physicality, and it's bad guys versus good guys, and everyone's in it together, and I was like, this is awesome. And by chance, a friend of mine, her younger brother was a wrestler, but now ran a small promotion in Toronto called Superkick. This guy, Chris Chambers.
Mhm.
And I always knew the kid. And I remember talking to him in 2015 or 2016 when I came back from LA and lived back in Toronto. And he was trying to do wrestling. I talked to him about it. But okay, so I run into him. And so now my wife and I are into watching wrestling. We got the channel, we go to Raw and Buffalo, like we're fans. I run into him. I'm like, I wanted to do like a Rick Boogs thing where I just come in with the guitar and get the audience, and Chris is so smart, such a Vince McMahon. He's like, yeah, yeah, you do that. But then Stratos is going to come in and do this thing. He's going to hit you. You just go down. He'll take your guitar, just be a bully. And I'll be like, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I could do that. I do it, and now I realize, now looking back at it, oh, now I did a spot, right? Like I didn't realize, yeah, okay, I'll go down, whatever.
Yeah.
But so now I've done a spot. I didn't know that it's called a spot, and it was a spot.
Mhm.
Now Chris is like, hey, why don't you come check out training? So I go to the gym, and I'm like, stupid me, like I think I could do this somersaults. I do like 3 in a row. I'm dizzy. And, he was smart. He kind of reeled me in slowly. Like, yeah, okay, come see a training session. Come be in a training session. And I remember when the first training session, Chris wasn't there. It was someone teaching a class with real wrestlers, like learning. And now I'm like, okay. And like, can you do this? Oh, like, I was like thrown into this. Now I'm doing bumps. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like learning some stuff, like, but real wrestling stuff that I would ever in my matches ever use, like, like headlocks. Like now I realize you would never have me wrestling. Like it
Mhm.
just doesn't work. I'm too small. Like you would never have me like reverse. Like I was like, no, But I was learning all that shit. And Chris is like, now, okay, I think I'm gonna have you wrestle next month. I'm like, what? But stupid me. And it was half me believing in myself stupidly and half not really understanding what I was doing here. Like wrestling is, people devote themselves, and it's a fucking dream. It's a dream to even just be in a class. It's a dream to get a match. Forget it. Like I only learned this later. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Mhm.
Like I only learned how special and important this stuff is later. Um, and I also see what Chris saw. You have this ex-TV guy. I don't think he really realizes what he's doing. Like, But okay, let's see, let's test him out. You know what I mean? And stupid me, but when it started, that first, and I don't even know if any of my matches were as good as my first match. I won a tag team belt. Okay, I had a month to prepare. I had a week. For me, they spotted this thing basically a week before, and I got to. I wrote it. I studied it. I realized this is great. This is like a play, and and it's physical, and it's storytelling, and it's bad guys versus good guys. Like, this is awesome, and I'm learning a language. I'm taking, then you're gonna get some heat. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean the hot tag? What? I'm learning now. Now I'm like, wow. I realize now I'm learning a language, and back here, behind Gorilla is so special. You know what I mean? That nobody gets to see. Everybody like fucking walking around by themselves, like watching them prepare. And now, only after a few matches, now I'm fucking same thing. I'm like, we're going through your shit. Like, I only realized after how special, but that was, yeah, wrestling, man. It's a gift, and I don't know how much more I can do. I've probably done about maybe 9, 10 matches, and like, I've won a rumble, I've lost a rumble, I've won a lot of matches. I've won a few. I last time I wrestled, I got the pin. All right, and and the wrestling thing, even now, like, there's so much, it's tough because I fucking love it. I want to keep going, and I want to, but I'm not am I at a point where I can keep getting better? Do you know what I mean? Because I'm old, dude, and I got injured a couple of times where it's like, I don't know, man. Like, I did a cyclone, a hurricane DDT, went down, went boom. My leg fell asleep right away as soon as I did the ass bump, and that match is on YouTube. You'll see me try to get up, and my leg is shaking. I couldn't stand, and I'm in the middle of a match. I still had to do a couple of a couple of stunners. Do you know what I mean? And I couldn't even stand on the leg. And we just he grabbed me, and I had to tell him, dude, I can't stand up. So there's a little bit going on. I'm on the ropes. I finally got feeling back in my leg, but that was a weird one, that's your spine. That's, you know what I mean? It took months for it to get back to where I'd be driving the car, and I would cramp up, it wasn't good. Same thing happened in my shoulder, but actually shooting Tales of the Dark Side, like an acting gig, the wrestling thing. I get tackled. I tried to shoot, I can't remember which tag team, and I go in a bathroom, and I get tackled like this, hit the mat. It was hard. Shoulder fell asleep. More nerve stuff, But do I think I want to do more though? There was one time, in Winnipeg, I gave a Canadian destroyer where Michael Richard Allen Clark wanted to do it. He hadn't shown up yet, but Michael Allen Richard Clark wants to do a Canadian destroyer. And Stratos, who I came with, who's my guardian, not kayfabe, he's my buddy. Anyways, he looks over me, and he was like, he's not doing it. And I said, what's a Canadian destroyer? I look at it on YouTube, look at it. I've never done one. I'm like, okay, if he clears me, I'll be okay. It's really, I don't do anything. It's easy for me.
I watched that clip actually before this interview.
Yeah, it's not the best one you've ever seen. I look at it, I'd rather jump off the rope and do one. But anyways, it kind of came off, right? I was okay. Did a fire up, it worked. I was like, oh, what a great fucking tool. And I joke with my wife about, I really want to learn how to do a suicide dive. I want a great house. I'd love a good house show, because the more you could, as a baby face, the more you have those stupid dynamic moves, you could tell better stories.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? You that language, it's like a language, right? the more words I have, I can tell the stories. And at my age, I don't know if I can keep learning words, bro, because do you know what I mean? But then I do that unrehearsed, by the way. They're just like, we were in the back. It's just like, just grab me like this. And I grabbed them. All right. And that was all we did.
Mhm.
And I did it for the first time in front of 1,000 people. It went over. I was okay. Oh, and then it got me like, oh man, I missed this.